The blood came first, thick drops pooling in the cracks of the warehouse floor where her knees pressed against concrete that smelled like rust and gasoline. She didn't cry anymore. 7 years old, and she'd learned that crying only made them angrier, made the man with the scarred knuckles lean closer until she could smell the whiskey on his breath and see the veins in his eyes like red spiderwebs. "Where's your daddy?" he asked again, and his voice was almost gentle, which was worse than the shouting. Gentle meant he was deciding how much pain to use. She kept her eyes on the floor. Someone had spilled motor oil there once and never cleaned it. The stain looked like a bird with broken wings. "I don't know." The slap came fast, but not hard. A warning, not a punishment. "Not yet. Little girls who lie get hurt. You understand that." She nodded because nodding was easier than words, and words were traps anyway. Her father had told her that once, before he stopped coming home, before the men in suits started watching their apartment building, before her mother started flinching every time a car engine started outside their window. The scarred man crouched down until they were eye level. He had a tattoo on his neck, 3 teardrops that meant he'd killed 3 people, though she didn't know that then. She'd learn it later, along with too many other things children shouldn't have to know. Your daddy took something that doesn't belong to him, something very valuable, and now some very dangerous people want it back. He tilted his head like a dog hearing a strange sound. You know what happens to little girls whose daddies steal from the Malakoff family? She didn't answer because there wasn't an answer that would make him go away. The warehouse had 3 other men in it. She'd counted them when they first dragged her from the playground where she'd been drawing hopscotch squares with pink chalk. One by the door, smoking a cigarette that glowed orange in the darkness. One by the rusted machinery, arms crossed, face hidden in shadow. One right behind her, close enough that she could hear him breathing through his mouth, thick and wet like he had a cold. The scar man stood up, his knees cracking. "We wait," he said to the others. "Sooner or later, Daddy's going to come save his little princess." But Daddy wasn't coming. She knew that somehow, the way animals know when storms are coming. Daddy was already gone, had been gone for 3 days, and Mommy had been crying into dish towels so the neighbors wouldn't hear, and there was nothing left but the waiting and the men and the blood on her knees from where they'd shoved her down. That's when the first motorcycle engine cut through the night. Then a second, then 5 more, a thunder that made the warehouse walls vibrate and sent pigeons scattering from the rafters in an explosion of wings and dust. The man by the door dropped his cigarette. The hell. The scar man's face changed. Something flickered across it like a shadow. There and gone. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The engines cut off all at once, and the silence that followed was somehow louder than the noise had been. Then came the footsteps. Boots on concrete. Slow and deliberate, like whoever was wearing them had all the time in the world and knew it. The warehouse door didn't open. It exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood and bent metal, and the man who'd been guarding it was on the ground before anyone could move, blood streaming from his nose, a boot pressed against his throat. "Touch the kid, and I'll make you eat your own fingers one at a time." The voice belonged to a woman who looked like she'd been carved from iron and bad intentions. 6 feet tall, in motorcycle boots, arms covered in tattoos that told stories in ink and scar tissue, eyes the color of winter ice. Her cut, the leather vest that said more than words ever could, bore the patch of a motorcycle club. Hell Angels MC. The Grim Reaper riding a motorcycle through flames. Beneath it, another patch, Sergeant at Arms. Behind her came 5 more. Men and women who moved like predators, who wore their violence like jewelry, who filled the warehouse with something that made the air feel heavier. The scar man's hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun everyone knew was there, but he didn't draw it. Couldn't, because the woman with the winter eyes had a shotgun pointed at his chest, and at this range the shot would cut him in half. "Vasily," she said, and her voice could have frozen blood. "Been a while." The scarred man, Vasily, smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Reaper, didn't expect you to involve yourself in family business." "Family business?" The woman, Reaper, stepped closer, her boots crunching on broken glass. "That what we're calling kidnapping children now?" The girl's father. I don't give a single damn about the girl's father. I care about the fact that 3 of your boys snatched a 7-year-old off a playground in broad daylight. That's not business, Vasily. That's a line you don't cross. Another biker moved forward, a man with a beard like a Viking and knuckles that looked like they'd broken against too many faces. He had a patch that said enforcer. We got a rule in this city. Been a rule for 20 years, ever since your boss and our president sat down and drew the territories. Kids are off limits. Always have been. Vasily's jaw tightened. Victor's daughter. The man stole $2 million in product from the Malikov family. What would you have us do? Ask nicely. I'd have you act like you've got some goddamn sense. Reaper's finger rested on the shotgun trigger. The girl didn't steal anything. She's 7. And if anything happens to her, if she's got one bruise, one scratch, one bad dream because of you, there won't be enough holes in the ground to hide the bodies. The man behind her shifted. His breathing had gotten faster. Fear had a smell, sweat, and adrenaline, and it was starting to fill the warehouse like smoke. You threatening the Malikov family? Vasily asked, but his voice had lost its certainty. I am stating facts. The treaty between our organizations says no kids. No civilians who aren't in the game. Your boss signed it in his own blood. You remember that? Or has he gotten so fat on his own power that he thinks the rules don't apply to him anymore? Silence stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. The girl hadn't moved. She stayed on her knees, watching, learning that power wasn't always about who had the most guns. Sometimes it was about who was willing to use them. Sometimes it was about who could make other people believe they'd use them. Vasily's hand moved away from his jacket. Slowly, like someone backing away from a rattlesnake. The father still owes. Then you find the father. You track him down. You do whatever business you need to do with him. But the girl goes home. Tonight. Now. Without a single goddamn hair on her head harmed. Reaper's eyes never blinked. And if I hear about you, or any of your people going near her again, if I hear she can't sleep at night because she's checking under her bed for monsters that look like you, I'm going to visit your boss personally. We clear. The warehouse held its breath. Then Vasily nodded. Once. Sharp and final. Clear. Good. Reaper lowered the shotgun, but didn't put it away. She turned to the girl for the first time, and her voice changed, softened just enough to not be a weapon anymore. Hey, kid. You hurt. The girl shook her head. Can you walk? She nodded. Then come here. Slow. Nobody's going to touch you. The girl stood on legs that shook like new branches in wind. She took one step, then another. The man behind her, the one who'd been breathing heavy, moved like he might reach for her, and without looking, Reaper said, Don't even think about it, Pavel. The man froze. The girl walked forward, past Vasily, who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the man on the floor with the boot still on his throat, all the way to Reaper, who knelt down, despite her size, despite the shotgun, despite everything, and said, You're safe now. What's your name? Katia. Katia. Pretty name. I'm Reaper. That's not my real name, but it's what people call me. You know why? Katia shook her head. Because I collect debts. And tonight, these men owed you something. They owed you your freedom, your safety, your right to be a kid who draws with chalk and doesn't know what fear tastes like. Reaper's hand moved slowly, carefully, and touched Katia's shoulder. Just a touch. Just enough to be real. That debt's paid now. You understand? Katia nodded, though she didn't really understand at all. Not then. Not for years. Good. We're going to take you home. Your mom's probably worried sick. They walked out of the warehouse together. The girl and the woman who looked like she ate nightmares for breakfast, and 7 bikers who moved like a wall of leather and chrome between Katia and anything that might hurt her. The motorcycles waited outside like metal horses, engines cooling in the night air, chrome reflecting streetlights. Reaper didn't put Katia on a bike. She called someone, a woman with a van who arrived 10 minutes later, who had kind eyes and a soft voice and blankets that smelled like lavender. Take her home. Stay with her and her mother until sunrise. Make sure nobody comes knocking. The woman nodded and Katia climbed into the van, but before the door closed, she looked back at Reaper. Why, she asked. Why what, kid? Why did you help me? You don't know me. Reaper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because a long time ago, Someone helped me when nobody else would. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever had the power to do the same for someone else, I would. Every single time. No exceptions. The van door closed, and Katia watched through the window as the bikers mounted their motorcycles, as the engines roared to life again, as they disappeared into the night like ghosts with exhaust pipes. She went home. Her mother cried and held her so tight she couldn't breathe, and the woman with the kind eyes stayed on their couch all night with a gun under a pillow. And when morning came, they were both still alive. But the story didn't end there. Stories like this never do. Because 3 days later, Victor, the father, the thief, the man who'd stolen $2 million in product, turned up in a dumpster behind a Chinese restaurant with his throat cut and his hands missing. The police called it gang violence. The newspapers ran it for one day and then forgot about it. The Malakoff family sent the message they always sent: debts must be paid. And Katia's mother packed their apartment in 6 hours flat, threw everything they could carry into 2 suitcases, and they left the city on a bus heading west, running from ghosts that would follow them for years. But first, before they left, Katia's mother did something that changed everything that came after. She made a phone call. The voice that answered was rough, like gravel and whiskey. "Yeah, this is Irina Volkov, Victor's widow. I need to speak to Reaper." "Lady, that's not how this works. You don't just." "Tell her Katia's mother is calling. Tell her I need to say thank you. Tell her." Irina's voice broke. "Tell her I need to know how to keep my daughter safe." There was a long pause. Then hold. 3 minutes later, a different voice came on the line. "Winter ice and iron. This is Reaper. My husband is dead. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made choices. Bad ones. And now my daughter and I are paying for them. We're leaving the city. Today. But Irina closed her eyes. "I don't know how to protect her. Not from people like the Malakovs. Not from men who think they can take whatever they want." Reaper was quiet. Then she said something that would echo through the next decade like a stone dropped in still water. "Where are you going?" "I don't know. West. Somewhere small. Somewhere they won't look. There's a town called Ashford, 300 miles from here. Population, 5,000. The Hell Angels have a charter there, a small one, just 6 members, but they're good people. They keep the town clean. No hard drugs. No predators. No bullshit." A pause. "I'll make a call. When you get there, you go to a bar called the Iron Horse. You ask for a man named Kodiak. You tell him Reaper sent you. He'll make sure you and your daughter have a place to land. A job. A fresh start. No strings attached. Why would you do this? You don't owe us anything. I owe every kid who gets caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes. I owe every woman who's trying to build something better out of the wreckage she didn't cause." Reaper's voice softened just slightly. "And maybe I owe a little girl who looked at me in a warehouse and asked why. That takes guts. That takes something special. I don't forget that." Irina cried then. Not the quiet tears she'd been holding back, but real sobs that shook her whole body. "Thank you. Thank me by keeping that kid safe. By raising her to be strong. By teaching her that the world's got darkness in it, but it's also got people who fight the darkness. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Then we're square." The line went dead. 2 days later, Irina and Katia arrived in Ashford on a Greyhound bus that smelled like diesel and stale coffee. The town was everything Reaper had promised: small, quiet, the kind of place where people still waved at strangers, and the biggest crime was shoplifting from the hardware store. The Iron Horse sat on Main Street, a squat brick building with motorcycles parked out front like metal sentinels. Irina held Katia's hand so tight her fingers went numb, and they walked through the door together. The bar was dark and smelled like old wood and beer. A man stood behind the counter, 6'5", 300 pounds of muscle gone slightly soft, beard down to his chest, eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. His cut said Hell Angels MC, Ashford Charter. His name patch said Kodiak. He looked up when they entered, and something in his face shifted. Recognition without meeting. "You Irina?" "Yes." Reaper called. Said you'd be coming. Said you needed a soft place to land. He came around the bar, moving with surprising grace for someone his size. "I got an apartment above the bar. 2 bedrooms. Rent-free for the first 3 months while you get settled. I can get you work at the diner down the street. They're always looking for waitresses, and the tips are decent. Your girl can go to the elementary school 2 blocks over. Good teachers. Safe. Irina's eyes filled with tears again. I can't. We can't pay you back. Didn't ask you to. Reaper said you needed help. That's enough for me. Kodiak looked down at Katia, who was staring at him like he was a mountain that had learned to walk. You like pancakes, kid? Katia nodded. Kitchen's open. Let's get some food in you. Then we'll get you settled. They stayed. Days turned to weeks, turned to months, turned to years. Irina worked at the diner and saved every penny. Katia went to school and made friends and learned to ride a bike. The nightmares came less frequently. The fear that someone would kick in their door and drag them back to the city faded like an old photograph. The Hell Angels were always there, not obvious, not invasive, but present. Kodiak fixed their leaky faucet. A woman named Sparrow taught Katia how to throw a punch after a boy in her class pushed her down. A man named Wrench made sure their car, an old Honda Civic that Irina bought for $800, never broke down, even when by all rights it should have died years ago. They didn't ask for anything in return. They just existed around Katia and her mother like a wall of leather and chrome and unspoken promises. Katia grew up in that town. She grew up strong and stubborn and smart, with her mother's determination and something else, something that came from watching Reaper face down 4 armed men with nothing but a shotgun and absolute certainty. She grew up knowing that monsters were real, but so were the people who fought them. By the time she turned 15, she'd almost forgotten that night in the warehouse. Almost. But some memories don't fade. They just sink deeper, becoming part of the foundation you build yourself on. Then her mother got sick. It started with fatigue, then weight loss, then pain that got worse instead of better. By the time they caught the cancer, it had already spread to her liver, her lungs, her bones. Stage 4. Terminal. 6 months at most. Irina took the news like she'd taken everything else in her life, with quiet dignity and fierce determination to make every moment count. She worked until she physically couldn't anymore. She made sure Katia had everything she needed. She wrote letters, dozens of them, to be opened on birthdays and graduations and wedding days that might never come. And on a Tuesday night in October, 3 months after the diagnosis, she called Katia into her bedroom, the one above the Iron Horse where they'd first arrived 8 years ago, the one they'd never left because it felt like home, and said, I need to tell you something. About your father. About why we really left. Katia sat on the edge of the bed. She was 15 now, tall and lean, with her mother's dark hair and eyes that had seen too much too young. I know Dad stole from the Malakovs. I know they killed him. That's not the whole truth. Irina's voice was weak, her skin pale, but her eyes were clear. Your father didn't steal $2 million in product. He stole information. Files. Records. Proof that the Malakov family was paying off half the police department, that they were trafficking more than drugs. They were trafficking people. Girls. Some of them younger than you are now. The room seemed to tilt. He was going to go to the FBI. He had everything they needed to take down the entire organization. But they found out before he could. They killed him and destroyed the evidence. Or at least they thought they did. Irina reached under her pillow and pulled out a USB drive. Small. Black. Ordinary looking. He gave this to me the night before he disappeared. Made me promise to keep it safe. To give it to the right person when the time came. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm dying, sweetheart. And because you're old enough to make your own choice about what to do with it. You could destroy it. Forget any of this ever existed. Live your life and be safe. Irina's hand trembled as she held out the drive. Or you can finish where your father started. But if you do that, the Malakovs will come for you. They'll come hard and they'll come fast. And there's no guarantee anyone can protect you. Not even the Hell Angels. Katia stared at the USB drive. Such a small thing to contain so much weight. What would you do? She asked. I'd burn it and never look back. I'd choose you over justice every single time. But I'm your mother. That's my job. Irina smiled, sad and tired. Your job is to figure out who you want to be. The kind of person who looks away, or the kind who steps up when it matters, even when it's dangerous. That's not fair. No, baby, it's not. Nothing about any of this is fair. But fair doesn't matter. What matters is what you do next. Katia took the USB drive. It was warm from being under the pillow, warm from her mother's failing body heat. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. Just promise me one thing. Whatever you decide, you talk to Kodiak first. You got a good head on his shoulders. He'll help you think it through. Katia promised, though she wasn't sure she'd keep it. Her mother died 6 weeks later on a Sunday morning while Katia held her hand and hummed the lullaby she'd sung when Katia was small enough to fit in her arms. The funeral was small, just Katia and the Ashford Charter and a handful of people from the diner who'd known Irina as the woman who always remembered their orders and never forgot to smile. They buried her in the town cemetery under an oak tree that was older than anyone could remember. Kodiak paid for the headstone. Sparrow held Katia while she cried. Wrench stood guard like someone might try to interrupt the grief. That night, Katia sat in the apartment that was hers now, though it felt empty and wrong without her mother in it, and she held the USB drive and thought about choices. She could run, take the small amount of money her mother had saved, get on a bus, disappear into a different city with a different name and a different life. She could destroy it, smash the drive, throw the pieces in the river, let the past stay buried with her parents. Or she could fight. The decision took 3 days. 3 days of not sleeping, not eating, walking the streets of Ashford at 2 in the morning while the whole town slept, and the only sound was her footsteps and the distant rumble of motorcycles. On the 4th day, she walked into the Iron Horse before it opened and found Kodiak doing inventory behind the bar. "I need your help," she said. He looked up from his clipboard, took in her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way she was holding herself like she might shatter or turn to steel depending on the next 5 minutes. What kind of help? She told him everything. About the USB drive, about what her father had stolen, about the choice her mother had given her and the choice she'd made. When she finished, Kodiak set down his clipboard and was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know what you're asking for?" "Yes. You know the Malakovs will come, but they won't stop until either you're dead or they are." "Yes. You know that even if we help you, and that's a big if, there's no guarantee it'll work? That people with that kind of power have ways of making evidence disappear? That they've got lawyers and cops and judges in their pocket?" "I know. Then why? Your mother gave you an out. A chance to walk away. Why throw that away?" Katia looked at him with eyes that were too old for 15. "Because 8 years ago, a woman with a shotgun and a motorcycle walked into a warehouse and told a room full of killers that some lines don't get crossed. That kids are off limits. That there are rules even monsters have to follow. And she made them listen." "Reaper." "Yeah. And I've been thinking if she could do that, if she could stand up to men with guns and make them back down just by believing she was right, then maybe I can do something too. Maybe I can take what my father died for and make it mean something. Maybe I can make sure the girls the Malakovs are trafficking, the ones nobody's saving, maybe I can give them what Reaper gave me." "And what's that?" "A chance." Kodiak studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. "All right, but we're not doing this half-assed. We're going to call Reaper. We're going to call the main charter. We're going to do this right, with backup and planning and every advantage we can get. Because if we're going to war with the Malakov family, we're going to win. Agreed?" "Agreed." He picked up his phone. The call lasted 10 minutes. Katia couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Kodiak's face change, from serious to concerned to something that looked like grim satisfaction. When he hung up, he said, "Reaper's coming. She'll be here in 6 hours. She's bringing people, important people, and she says to tell you that you've got guts, kid." Her words. "She also says you'd better be damn sure about this, because once we start, there's no going back." "I'm sure." 6 hours later, 8 motorcycles rolled into Ashford. Not a small rumble this time, but a full thunder that made windows rattle and dogs bark and brought people to their doorways to watch. Reaper looked exactly the same as Katia remembered. Tall, iron-hard, eyes like winter, and exactly different, with more gray in her hair and more scars on her hands. She dismounted and walked straight to Katia, without preamble or greeting. "You remember me?" Reaper asked. "Yes." "You know what you're starting?" "Yes." "You scared?" "Terrified." Reaper smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. Good. Fear keeps you smart. It's the people who aren't scared who get killed. She gestured to the other writers. We've got a lawyer, former prosecutor who went private and specializes in organized crime. We've got a tech specialist who can verify your data and make copies that can't be disappeared. We've got 2 FBI agents who are very interested in taking down the Malakoff family and have been looking for evidence for years. And we've got you, a 15-year-old girl with her dead father's courage and her dead mother's strength. That's a hell of a combination. Over the next 3 days, they worked. The lawyer, a woman named Chun with sharp eyes and sharper questions, verified the data on the USB drive. Financial records, communications, video evidence, names and dates and places. Everything the FBI would need to build a case that couldn't be bought or buried. The tech specialist, a man called Ghost who looked like he'd never seen sunlight, made 20 copies, encrypted them, distributed them to locations across the country with instructions to release them to the media if anything happened to Katia or the original. The FBI agents, one young and eager, one older and tired in the way that comes from fighting losing battles too many times, took the evidence and promised to move fast before the Malakoffs could run or destroy what they hadn't already destroyed. And Reaper sat with Katia in the empty bar after everyone else had gone to sleep and said, "You're going to have to testify. You know that, right? They're going to need you to authenticate the evidence, to explain how you got it, to stand up in court and point at powerful men and say they're guilty." I know. And the Malakoffs will try to stop you. They'll send lawyers to intimidate you. They'll send investigators to dig up dirt on your family. They'll send men, the kind you met in that warehouse, to make you disappear if they think they can get away with it. What do I do? Reaper leaned back in her chair. You don't face it alone. We're going to put protection on you. Real protection. Not just cops who might be on the Malakoff payroll. Hell, angels will rotate shifts. Someone will always be watching. You won't be able to move without us knowing where you are. It'll feel like a cage sometimes. You'll get frustrated, but it'll keep you alive. For how long? However long it takes. Months at least. Maybe longer if the trial gets delayed. You ready for that? Katia thought about her mother's letters, still unread. About her father's body in a dumpster. About girls she'd never met who were being bought and sold like merchandise. Yeah, I'm ready. The first domino fell 2 weeks later when the FBI raided 6 Malakoff properties simultaneously. Warehouses, offices, houses where the family conducted business. They arrested 37 people, seized records, shut down operations that had been running for decades. The media exploded. Front-page news. National coverage. The biggest organized crime bust in the city's history. And in Ashford, Katia went to school with 2 Hell Angels following 3 cars behind, went to the grocery store with Sparrow walking next to her, slept in her apartment with Wrench on the couch and his gun on the coffee table. The Malakoffs tried once. Just once. 3 men in a black SUV who followed her home from school, who waited until she was walking from the parking lot to her door, who started to get out with weapons that bulged under their jackets. They didn't make it 5 steps. Sparrow put the first one down with a tire iron to the knee. Wrench had a gun against the second one's head before he could draw his own. And Kodiak, who'd been watching from the bar's window, came out with a baseball bat and a smile that promised broken bones and regret. The 3 men were zip-tied and left on the police station steps with a note. The girl is protected. Try again and you won't walk away. The Malakoffs didn't try again, because by then, the evidence was in the hands of prosecutors who couldn't be bought, and the trial date was set, and the only way out was through. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Katia testified on day 12. She wore a blue dress her mother had bought for her 8th grade graduation. She walked into the courthouse with Reaper on one side and Kodiak on the other, past protesters and reporters and gawkers who wanted to see the girl who'd brought down an empire. She sat in the witness box with her hand on a Bible and swore to tell the truth. And then she did. She told them about her father, about the night she was taken, about the warehouse and the men and the blood on her knees. She told them about the USB drive and what was on it. She told them about the girls in the files, the ones whose names she'd memorized, whose faces haunted her dreams. The defense attorney tried to shake her, asked her about her father's criminal record, implied she was lying for attention or money or revenge. suggested that a 15-year-old couldn't possibly understand what she was claiming to understand. Katia looked at him with eyes that had watched her mother die and said, "I understand that trafficking human beings is wrong. I understand that buying and selling children is evil. I understand that my father died trying to stop it, and I understand that if I don't finish what he started, more girls will disappear. That's all I need to understand." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. All 16 defendants. Maximum sentences. The Malakhov Empire, built over 30 years with blood and fear and money, collapsed in a single afternoon. Katia walked out of the courthouse into a crowd of reporters and cameras, and questions shouted so loud they blurred into noise. Reaper pushed through them like an icebreaker through frozen water, clearing a path, saying nothing, just moving forward until they reached the motorcycles waiting at the curb. "Where do you want to go?" Reaper asked. Katia thought about Ashford, about the apartment above the Iron Horse, about her mother's grave under the oak tree, about the small town that had kept her safe when the whole world seemed designed to hurt her. "Home," she said. They rode back together. 8 motorcycles and one 15-year-old girl who'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive monsters was to become something they feared more. The next 5 years were quieter. Katia finished high school, got a job at the Iron Horse washing dishes and learning to bartend, took online classes in criminal justice and psychology, trained with Sparrow 3 times a week, boxing and Krav Maga, and how to break someone's grip when they grabbed you. She grew up in the shadow of motorcycles and leather cuts, surrounded by people who'd chosen to protect rather than prey, who understood that power without purpose was just another word for tyranny. And she waited, because the Malakhovs might have been destroyed, but their world hadn't been. Other families, other operations, other girls who needed someone to stand between them and the men who saw them as merchandise. On her 20th birthday, Katia walked into the Iron Horse and found Reaper sitting at the bar, nursing a whiskey. She'd come alone this time, no fanfare, no announcement, just showed up the way she always did, when she was needed. "I've been thinking," Katia said. "Yeah, about what you said. That night in the warehouse. About someone helping you once, and you promising to help others." Reaper took a sip of her drink. "I remember. I want to make that promise too. I want to help, but I don't know how. I'm not like you. I'm not a biker. I don't have a club. I'm just—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "You're just a girl who looked 4 armed men in the eye and asked why. You're just a girl who stood up in court and burned an empire to the ground. You're just a girl who could have run, but chose to fight." Reaper set down her glass. "That's not nothing, Katia. That's everything. So what do I do? You've got options. You could prospect for the club, patch in, become a full member, ride with us. We'd be honored to have you. Or," Reaper paused, "or you could do something else. Something we've been thinking about for a while. A foundation, a nonprofit, something legal and official that can do the work we can't do. Work with law enforcement, with social services, with the courts. Help victims. Build cases. Take down traffickers. Change the system from the inside instead of just punching it from the outside." "You mean like a real organization?" "I mean exactly that. We've got lawyers who'd work for it. We've got money. The Hell Angels aren't just a motorcycle club. We're a business, and a profitable one. We've got connections in law enforcement, in politics, in places that matter. What we don't have is someone to run it. Someone who understands what it's like to be helpless and scared. Someone who's got the fire to make it work." Reaper looked at her. "Someone like you." The idea was terrifying and